Hi, welcome back to another podcast with Mr. Hagan. And on this podcast, we're going to continue to talk about some of the details of calculating costs. And so on previous podcasts, we calculated all these costs on here on this table. Our total product, total variable cost, total fixed cost, total variable cost, total cost, average fixed cost, average variable cost, average total cost, marginal cost. And then what you want to do, and I'm just going to show you these graphs, but you can pause these and graph them yourself. And by the way, if you have not ever done that, then I strongly recommend that you get out a piece of graph paper and draw these graphs and then take notes. Actually, the first graph I'm going to mention is less important, but the second one is really, really important. So the first graph that's less important, but we still want to take a quick look at it. We would graph the quantity on the horizontal axis, and that would go from 0 to 10. And then on the vertical axis, we would graph the total fixed costs, the total variable costs, and then just the total cost. And you would graph all of those. And so if you want to pause it, the video, now would be the time to do it. Pause the video real fast and draw this graph. The quantity is on the horizontal axis. That's right here. This is the quantity. And on the vertical axis, you would be graphing the total cost, total variable cost, total fixed cost. Scale it from 0 to 700 if you want to draw it. So if you want to do that, you can pause now and then come back. Okay, so what this looks like, there's just a couple things that I want to highlight on this graph, and then I won't talk about this graph again, actually, because there's going to be another graph that's going to be more important. But let's just draw some general principles. So what a total cost curve looks like is it's going to be concave down followed by concave up. Concave down followed by concave up. Now, if you don't know what those words mean, it just simply means this. And I'm just going to draw these by hand real fast up here in the corner, just in case you can't quite tell on my graph. But total cost is always going to look like this. It's going to like bow this way and then bow back up that way. That's what a total cost curve is going to look like. And that's what I mean by saying the concave down and concave up. All right, that's what this total cost curve is always going to look like. And then the total variable cost is going to be right below the total cost, and it's going to do the same thing. It's going to be right below it and do the same thing. And I actually drew mine wrong over here where I just drew it by hand, because here's where I drew it wrong. And the reason why is this. Because the total cost curve is going to intersect the vertical axis right here at the fixed cost. Now notice the fixed costs. They're the same all the way across. And that makes sense because the fixed costs, well, they're fixed. And in our example, the fixed costs are equal to 50 all along the way. The fixed costs are equal to 50. And so the fixed costs, boom, there they are, 50 all the way along. Now, right here in between and let me just change my color up here, right in between the total cost and total variable cost, this distance in between is going to be the fixed costs, right? Because remember, the total costs are equal to the total variable costs plus the total fixed costs. And so if you add the difference between those two is always going to be the fixed cost. So the fixed cost, which is 50, is going to be the vertical distance in between the total cost and the total variable cost. It's going to be 50. Every single one of these is going to be the fixed cost. This is going to be 50, this is 50, this is 50, this is 50, and so on. So that's what these curves are always going to look like. So this is, I mean, it's correct in terms of the shape, but it really should be hitting the vertical axis somewhere up here wherever the fixed costs are. So that was my only mistake right here. But the purpose of drawing this was simply to say, the only purpose was to say, this is what the fixed cost is always going to look like. So let me just draw it by hand real fast again, just so I've drawn it correctly. So the total cost curve would look like this. Total cost curve is going to go like bow that way and then bow this way. That would be the total cost. And then the total variable cost, that's going to be right here at the origin, and that's going to do the same thing. It's going to bow up like that. That's going to be total variable cost. And then your fixed costs, they're going to go straight across from here. These are going to be your fixed costs. That's what it's always going to look like. Okay? So This graph I wanted to make sure that we took a quick look at so that we recognize total cost graphs when we see them. But this is much less important than the second graph that we're going to do. And that is on the second graph, we're going to take a look at the averages and the margins, the averages and the margins. But we'll do that on a future podcast. All right, so thanks for joining me in another podcast. This has been Mr. Hagan, and we'll see you on the next podcast.